Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to stop what you are doing for just a second.
Right.
Don't look at your phone. Don't look at the road if you're driving. Well, actually, please keep your eyes on the road. But mentally, I want you to look at the calendar.
It is a specific date we need to anchor ourselves in.
It is. It's Saturday, January 24th, 2026. And if you have been conscious for the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, you know that the vibe out there is strange.
Strange is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I think that's putting it mildly.
It is. It really is. It feels like the operating system of the world is glitching. You go to the grocery store and the prices just don't make sense. You look at the stock market and it's hitting all-time highs while the news is talking about these like bizarre trade wars that sound like they're from the 1800s.
Right. Nothing seems to connect in the way it used to.
Exactly. You have this gnawing feeling that the rules we all grew up with, you know, the rules about how money works, how politics works, how countries are supposed to work, are just dissolving, fading away.
And that feeling, that specific sense of disorientation, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
We're doing a deep dive into a source that doesn't just describe this feeling, it actually gives it a name.
It does.
The source is a piece of writing titled Netizen, Navigating the Flux. It was dropped into the digital ether by a writer named Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
And, you know, calling this a blog post or an article, it's like calling the Magna Carta a sticky note. It just doesn't do it justice.
No, it's really a manifesto.
It is a manifesto.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly ambitious one. It attempts to synthesize things that, frankly, have no business being in the same document.
What are we talking about here?
We're going to be talking about high-level macroeconomic theory, the history of hip-hop in the Himalayas, ancient Hindu eschatology, and the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence and robotics.
It's a lot. It's a wild mix. But the hook that grabbed me, the thing that made me say, okay, we have to talk about this, is the central thesis. The source claims that we are living in the end times. Now pause. Take a breath. Before you start stocking up on canned beans and shotgun shells, we need to clarify something very, very important.
Right. Because when we hear end times, our brains go straight to Hollywood, don't they?
Immediately.
We think asteroids, zombies, nuclear winter. The source is very explicit that this is not what is happening.
So the planet isn't blowing up. That's good news.
The planet is fine. End times, in this context, refers to the end of an age.
An age, not like the end of the world.
No. The source frames human history in these massive chunks of time millennia. And the argument is that we're at the tail end of a 5,000-year cycle. We are transitioning from one mode of human existence to another.
And the source has names for these ages, right?
It does. It calls it the transition from the age of scarcity to the age of abundance.
Okay, the age of abundance. And that glitchy feeling you have, that feeling I was talking about, the source calls that the flux.
Exactly. That is the friction of the transition. It's the sound of the gears grinding because we're trying to shift from first gear directly into fifth gear without using the clutch.
And apparently the people who are supposed to be driving the car, you know, the economists, the politicians, the experts, they are completely baffled.
They're looking at the dashboard, and none of the gauges make any sense anymore. The speedometer is spinning, the fuel gauge is flickering. It's chaos.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore this framework the source calls Kalkiism. We're going to try and figure out why Nobel Prize winners are scratching their heads. We are going to look at a theological argument that, and I love this, compares the Bible to gravity and Hinduism to relativity.
Which is just a fascinating analogy to chew on.
It really is. And then, and this is the part I am most excited about, we're going to ground all this high concept theory in a real person. We're going to do a massive deep dive into a case study. A man named Balen Shah. He is a structural engineer turned battle rapper turned mayor of Kathmandu who, according to this source, might just be a mythological archetype walking among us.
It sounds like science fiction when you say it like that, but the data points are very, very real.
Okay, so let's start with the confusion. Section 1, the crisis of current economics. The source starts by throwing some serious intellectual shade at some very big names, Paul Krugman and Ray Dalio.
These are the titans. I mean, if you study economics in any capacity, these are your gods. You read their books, you study their models.
But the source says they are wrong, or maybe more accurately, that they are just confused. Let's start with Krugman. He's a Nobel laureate. He literally wrote the textbooks on international trade. What is the source's beef with him?
So to understand the critique, you have to really understand what Krugman stands for. He is the champion of comparative advantage.
Can you break that down, the simple version?
Sure, it's the classic idea that trade is good because it allows nations to specialize in what they do best.
Hmm.
If the U.S. is really good at making software and China's really good at making solar panels, it makes mathematical sense for us to trade with each other.
Right. We focus on software, they focus on panels, and we both get more stuff cheaper than if we tried to do everything ourselves.
Exactly. It's efficient. It's a mathematical positive-sum game. It's been the bedrock of global economic policy for, 50 years?
At Economics 101.
It is. But
Yeah.
look at the world in January 2026. What is the U.S. doing? It's slapping tariffs on everyone.
And not just adversaries. That's the part that's so strange.
That's the key. It's on allies, adversaries, neutral parties. The source calls it haphazard. It's aggressive. There doesn't seem to be a coherent strategy behind it, at least not one that fits the old models.
It feels like we're just taxing things because we can. Like there's no grand plan.
Precisely. And to someone like Krugman, whose entire intellectual framework is built on the beauty and efficiency of free trade, this is just insanity. His models would say this should cause massive deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss.
Yeah, it's a term for economic inefficiency. When you impose a tariff, you're basically destroying value. It should hurt the consumer, it should hurt producers, it should slow down the entire economy. He looks at this rising tide of protectionism and says, this cannot possibly work.
The anomaly is that it is working, or at least the economy isn't collapsing.
Well, that's the thing. It's not collapsing. The U.S. economy isn't crashing. It's growing. And that leads us to the second giant the source takes on, Ray Dalio.
Okay, yeah, I follow Dalio. He's the principles guy from Bridgewater Associates. He has this whole theory about historical cycles and the changing world order.
Correct. Dalio treats history like a machine, a predictable machine. He argues empires rise on the back of things like education and productivity. Then they get rich. Then they get into debt. They get decadent, their internal politics get messy, and then they fall while a new power rises to take their place.
It's a cycle. He maps it out over hundreds of years.
He does. And the dominant narrative, based on his model for the last 10 years, has been what?
That the U.S. is the declining empire. We're Rome before the fall. We have the debt, we have the internal political conflict, we have the rise of a competitor in China. It all fits his model.
That is the standard Dalio diagnosis. By his own model, the U.S. should be stagnating. We should be seeing anemic growth, maybe 1%, maybe even 0%. We should be in the distribute wealth phase of the cycle, not the create wealth phase.
But here we are in 2026. What are the numbers that the source points to?
The source points out that the U.S. is hitting nearly 5% growth.
Whoa, wait, 5%. For a mature, developed economy like the United States, that's unheard of.
It's supposed to be impossible.
That's emerging market speed. That's like a small country just starting to industrialize.
It completely defies the physics of traditional economics. You just don't turn a battleship that fast. A massive, debt-laden, mature economy is not supposed to suddenly accelerate like a speedboat.
So why is it happening? If Krugman is wrong about trade crashing the economy and Dalio is wrong about the empire being in terminal decline, what are they both missing?
They are missing the roof. Or rather, they are missing the fact that the roof just got completely blown off the building.
I loved that phrase in the text, blowing the roof off. What does that mean in this context?
It's referring to artificial intelligence and robotics. See, you have to understand that all traditional economic models, whether you're talking about Adam Smith or Karl Marx or Ray Dalio, they all have one hard fundamental constraint baked into them.
And that is?
Labor, human labor. You need people to make stuff, to provide services. And people are a scarce resource. We age, we get tired, we demand wages, we need health care, we retire.
Right, the whole demographic crisis we used to talk about. We were panicking about Social Security running out because there wouldn't be enough young workers to pay for all the old retirees.
Exactly. That is a labor constraint model of the world. But the source argues that AI and robotics have fundamentally removed that constraint.
How so?
Well, if you have autonomous agents and humanoid robots that can work 247, that don't need to sleep, that don't retire, that don't need health care or a pension, suddenly the ratio of young human workers to old human retirees becomes irrelevant.
So productivity completely detaches from the human population.
Precisely. The source's argument is that we are growing at 5%, not because American workers suddenly became 5 times more productive, but because we have invented a new kind of worker that is infinitely scalable and works for the cost of electricity.
So Krugman and Dalio are basically trying to measure the speed of a rocket using a speedometer from a 1990 Honda Civic.
That's a perfect analogy. The needle is broken because the fundamental vehicle has changed. Their models weren't designed for a world with near infinite, near free labor.
And this brings us to the political side of the equation, because this economic chaos has a political face. The source brings up Donald Trump.
It does. And it's fascinating because it doesn't analyze him through a typical partisan lens as a Republican or a Democrat. It analyzes him as a phenomenon,
It calls him bewildering.
bewildering to the world and two-thirds of America. But in the context of the flux, the source says he makes perfect sense.
How?
If the economic bedrock is shattering, if the old rules of trade and labor and imperial cycles are gone, then the political superstructure that sits on top of that bedrock must become chaotic and unpredictable.
So Trump isn't the cause of the chaos. He's the avatar of it. He's the manifestation.
He is the symptom. He is what radical disruption looks like in a suit and a red tie. He represents the breakdown of the polite consensus that governed the old age. The source argues that you can't have a stable, predictable, boring leader when the underlying reality is shifting tectonically beneath your feet.
It's like trying to play a calm game of chess during an earthquake. The pieces are going to fall over no matter how carefully you play.
Exactly. And while the pieces are falling, we see these weird anachronisms pop up. The source makes a point to mention the Minnesota strike.
Yeah, talk to me about that. Of all the things happening in the world, why highlight a specific labor strike in Minnesota?
Because it feels like a ghost from the past. It's an anachronism. Here we are talking about AI, robots, 5% GDP growth, the end of labor as a constraint, and simultaneously you have thousands of workers walking a picket line demanding better wages in a very industrial 20th century way.
It's a glitch in the matrix.
It is the friction I mentioned earlier. It shows you have one foot in the old age of scarcity, where workers have to fight for their slice of a finite pie, and one foot stepping into the age of abundance, where the pie is getting infinitely larger, but nobody's figured out how to slice it or distribute it yet.
And the source points out this isn't just an American thing.
No, it makes a specific comparison to India, where massive nationwide strikes used to be a regular feature of life. Now they've become much more uncommon. So when a huge labor action like the one in Minnesota happens, it stands out as this desperate signal that the old social contract is broken. The old ways of dividing up the wealth aren't working in this new reality.
Okay, so we have confused economists, chaotic politics, and labor unrest that feels like it's from another time. The world is messy. But then the source does something I did not expect at all. It pivots to Bollywood,
Yes.
the film Jawan.
I mean, I love Shah Rukh Khan as much as the next guy, but what is a Bollywood blockbuster doing in the middle of an economic and theological manifesto?
This is where we start wading into the deeper, more theological waters of the text. The source calls Jawan a modern Kalki narrative.
Okay, for anyone who hasn't seen it, give us the elevator pitch. What is the movie about?
On the surface, it's a massive blockbuster. Shah Rukh Khan plays a vigilante, well, actually plays a father and a son, both vigilantes, who hijacks the system to force the government to fix massive problems.
Like, he exposes corrupt industrialists, he forces the government to forgive crippling farmers' loans, he cleans up failing public hospitals. He basically uses violence and terror to achieve social justice on a grand scale.
So classic action movie stuff. A hero outside the law.
On the surface, yes. But the source argues that the filmmakers, the director Attlee and the cast, were unwitting vessels. They thought they were making popcorn entertainment for the masses.
But really they were doing something else.
The source argues they were actually channeling a collective subconscious desire, a deep-seated yearning in the culture.
A desire for what?
For a savior, for an avatar, for a disruptive force to come and just clean house.
Yeah.
The Kalki figure in Hindu eschatology is the final incarnation of the god Vishnu, who comes at the very end of the Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness and decay.
And he's not a gentle savior, right?
No, Kalki comes riding a white horse, holding a flaming sword, to destroy the filth, punish the wicked, and restart the cycle of ages. The source's argument is that pop culture often dreams about the reality before it actually happens. Jawan is the dream. The reality it claims is coming.
That is a perfect segue into Section 2, the theological framework, because the source makes a really bold claim about how we should view religion in this new age. And it uses an analogy that I think is going to stick with me for a long, long time. Gravity versus relativity.
It is a brilliant pedagogical tool. It's a fantastic way to explain a very complex idea. Let's break it down. Think about Newton's law of universal gravitation.
Okay, Isaac Newton. The apple falls on his head. He figures out gravity.
Right. And Newton's laws are incredible. He figures out that objects attract each other with a force. And for 300 years, that model of the universe worked perfectly. It explains why the apple falls, why the moon orbits the Earth, how to calculate the path of a cannonball. It is true with a capital T.
But then Einstein shows up at the turn of the 20th century.
Einstein comes along with this theory of general relativity, and he says, actually, Isaac, with all due respect, it's not a force pulling things together. It's the curvature of space-time caused by mass and energy.
A much more complicated, mind-bending idea.
Totally. But here's the critical question. Does Einstein's theory mean Newton was wrong?
No, not really. Newton's laws still work for most things.
That's the key. Newton wasn't wrong. He was just incomplete. If you are building a bridge or firing a cannonball or sending a probe to Mars, Newtonian physics is perfectly accurate. It gets the job done. But
if you're dealing with extreme situations.
exactly, if you're dealing with black holes or the bending of starlight or the weird time dilation effects of GPS satellites, if you were dealing with the extremes of the universe, Newton's laws break down. They give you the wrong answer. You need Einstein. Einstein's theory is the broader, more profound framework that actually contains Newton's as a special case.
Okay, I get the physics analogy. So how does this apply to religion?
The source argues that the Bible, and by extension the entire Judeo-Christian Islamic worldview, is Newtonian.
What does that mean? How is it Newtonian?
It provides a set of fundamental moral laws, the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule. It provides a linear history. There was a creation, a fall from grace, a path to redemption, and a final judgment. It's a straight line from A to B.
Yeah.
And it works. It has held Western civilization together for 2 millennia. It is, in its own context, true.
Right.
But it is gravity. It explains the day-to-day moral life of an individual on Earth. However, the source argues that Sanatana Dharma, what we also call eternal Hinduism, is relativity.
How so?
Because it deals with the cosmic scale. It's not about one creation and one judgment. It deals with yugas, these cycles of time that last for millions of years. It talks about multiverses, the cyclical birth and death of universes, the nature of consciousness itself is the ultimate reality. It's a much bigger, more complex map.
So the argument is that as we enter this end times, this massive cosmic shift at the end of a 5,000-year cycle, the Newtonian Bible isn't enough to explain the data anymore.
That's the argument. When the roof blows off reality and you start seeing 5% growth in a declining empire, you need the theory of relativity. You need the framework that understands cyclical time, not just linear time. The source suggests that devout adherents of the Abrahamic faiths are going to feel increasingly disoriented and confused in the coming decades because their physics doesn't explain the new world, while the Hindu framework was built for exactly this kind of cosmic turnover.
Now, we have to touch on something here that is going to be very difficult for some of our listeners to hear. And I want to stress, our job here is to report on the source material impartially, not to endorse it.
Absolutely.
The source takes this idea of clearing the board for a new age very, very seriously, and it singles out one religion in particular, Islam.
Yes. We need to be very precise here. We are analyzing the netizen document, and this is a core part of its theological argument. The source claims that part of this end times transition involves a spiritual reckoning.
And it gets incredibly specific.
It does. The source explicitly identifies Islam as a primary obstacle to the coming age of abundance. It uses extremely harsh theological language, describing it as the religion of the devil within this specific Gnostic interpretation.
What's the reasoning behind that? What's the argument?
The argument presented in the text is that the deity described in the Quran demands blind obedience. The word Islam itself means submission, rather than offering the path to enlightenment or a direct experience of divinity that, say, Kalkiism promises. It frames it as a religion of control.
It even goes further, doesn't it? It questions the historical record.
It does. It makes the highly controversial claim that the historical figure of the Prophet Muhammad is a fictional construct. Now, to be clear, this is a fringe view, but it's central to the source's thesis. Why is the author doing this? It's not just to be inflammatory for its own sake.
So what's the purpose within the manifesto's logic?
In the logic of the manifesto, the age of limitation, this 5,000-year cycle we're ending, was built on structures of control. You had economic control over resources, which is capitalism, and you had ideological control over minds, which the author identifies with dogmatic religion.
So to enter the age of abundance, you have to break both.
From the source's perspective, yes. You have to shatter all the structures of control. It views this as a necessary, albeit incredibly painful, exposure of what it calls illusions. in order to clear the spiritual and intellectual ground for what comes next.
Which brings us to what comes next. We've torn down the old economics. We've torn down the old politics. We've, in this source's view, torn down the old religion. What are we building in the rubble? This is section 3, Kalkiism.
Or Karmaism, as it's also called.
The source mentions the Kalkiism Research Center in Kathmandu. And I love this detail. Apparently, there's a cadre of 50 economists there working on this model.
It just paints a picture, doesn't it? A think tank in the Himalayas near the roof of the world, rewriting the rules of global capitalism.
The Sherpas of the new economy. So what is Kalkiism? What is the core pitch?
The core pitch is to finally solve the paradox of productivity. We touched on this briefly earlier. Technology, especially AI, is making us wildly, unbelievably productive.
Right.
But under the current system, under capitalism, where does all that new wealth go? It concentrates at the very, very top.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos gets another $100 billion, and the warehouse worker gets a productivity tracker, and maybe a tiny raise.
The benefits aren't shared.
Not at all. Kalkiism says, AI creates abundance. The problem isn't making enough stuff anymore. The problem is our operating system for distributing it. So let's change the operating system. Let's look at the 5 core principles the source lays out.
Okay, principle number 1, abundance over scarcity.
This is the fundamental mindset shift. We have to stop acting like there isn't enough to go around. The source argues that if robots can build houses for the cost of materials and AI can grow food with precision vertical farming, then scarcity is no longer a physical reality. It becomes an artificial construct, a lie we tell ourselves to keep prices high and maintain control.
Okay, that's a big idea, but I can get on board with the logic. But principle number 2, this is where my brain starts to hurt. Time-based valuation.
This is the most radical part of the proposal. It's the engine of the whole system.
The proposal is to stop valuing human contribution in money and start valuing it in time. And correct me if I'm wrong here, everyone's time is valued equally.
That is the proposal. 1 hour of a doctor's time is worth exactly 1 hour of a janitor's time, is worth exactly 1 hour of a farmer's time, is worth exactly 1 hour of a podcast host's time.
Okay, hold on. I have to play the skeptic here for a minute. That sounds lovely on a greeting card, but in the real world, how does that work? If I'm a neurosurgeon and I spent 12 years in medical school, accumulated $500,000 in debt, missed my entire 20s studying while my friends were out partying,
Right.
and you tell me my hour of complex brain surgery is worth exactly the same as the guy who walks dogs down the street. I'm putting down the scalpel. I'm going to go walk dogs. It's less stressful.
That is the immediate, visceral, gut-level reaction that almost everyone has. Because it violates our deeply ingrained sense of fairness based on effort, skill, and investment.
It completely breaks the incentive structure. Why would anyone do the hard jobs? Why become an engineer or a scientist or a doctor?
This is the point where an economist from the Kalkiism Research Center would gently stop you and say, you are still thinking inside the prison of the age of scarcity.
Explain that to me. What am I missing?
You're assuming the incentives are still the same. Why do you want the neurosurgeon to be paid more today so they can pay off their massive student debt, so they can afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood, so their kids can go to good schools, so they can save for retirement and secure their future?
Right. All of those things are expensive and hard to get.
Exactly. You are assuming those things are scarce. But look ahead to principle number 4 in the manifesto. Universal guarantees.
Okay, what are they?
Free education, from preschool through a PhD, free, high-quality healthcare for everyone, and job guarantees. If the abundance principle is true, and robots and AI are doing most of the work, then the state can easily provide these things.
So in this system, the surgeon graduates with 0 debt.
0 debt. And they already have access to a great house, great food, great healthcare. They don't need a salary of $500,000 a year just to survive and have a decent life. The survival problem has been solved by the system itself.
So why do they perform surgery? Do they just do it for the love of brains?
They do it for status, for prestige, for karma, for the intellectual challenge, for the sheer joy of mastery and the respect of their peers. The source argues that once you relieve the gun to the head of basic survival, which is what a money-based salary is right now, humans don't become lazy couch potatoes. They become ambitious in a totally different, more meaningful way.
It's the Star Trek argument. I always come back to this. In the world of Star Trek, there is no money in the Federation. Captain Picard explores the galaxy because he wants to better himself and humanity, not because he's getting a paycheck at the end of the week.
That is a perfect parallel. Kalkiism is an attempt to build the practical economic bridge to get us to the Star Trek economy. But instead of just vaguely saying there's no money, It proposes a new currency, time, because time is the only thing we all actually share equally. Billionaire or beggar, we all get 24 hours in a day.
It's a beautiful idea. It really is. But the logistics of getting there from here seem impossible. How do
Right.
you implement this?
Well, principle 3 is the mechanic of the transition, cashless and state-supported. First step, you ban all physical cash. Everything becomes digital. This allows for perfect transparency and eliminates black markets. Second, you nationalize the banks. You have state-owned banking with zero-interest loans. You completely remove the casino of the financial sector. No more stock market speculation. No more derivatives.
Money stops being a tool for making more money.
It becomes a pure utility, like water or electricity. You turn the tap on, you get what you need to facilitate transactions in the time-based system. You don't hoard water in your basement hoping the price of water goes up. You just use what you need.
Okay, and that brings us to the final principle, number 5, spiritual integration.
This ties the whole economic model back to the theological framework of the end times. The goal of this economy isn't more consumption. It isn't he who dies with the most toys wins. That's the logic of the age of scarcity.
And the source has that great line you mentioned earlier.
It does. Abundance is merely a meal.
Abundance is merely a meal.
Meaning getting everyone fed, housed, educated, and healthy.
Oh.
That's just the prerequisite. That's the boring part we need to automate and get out of the way. Once everyone is fed and secure, the real work of humanity can finally begin.
Which is?
The work of consciousness, the work of spiritual knowledge, the work of enlightenment. The entire purpose of the Kalkiist economy is to free humanity from material anxiety so we can focus on becoming spiritual beings.
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for a whole civilization.
Precisely. We are currently, as a species, stuck at the bottom of the pyramid, fighting each other for food and shelter and safety. Kalkiism wants to build an automated foundation so we can all live at the very top of the pyramid.
Okay, so we have the theory, we have the theology, but theories are just words on a page until you put a face on them. And this source, Netizen, doesn't just give us a theory, it gives us an avatar.
The archetypes.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting.
The source claims that political leaders aren't just people. They're actors in a grand divine play, embodying ancient archetypes. It briefly mentions Narendra Modi in India as the Hanuman archetype.
Right, Hanuman, the monkey god from the Ramayana. He's the ultimate devotee, the celibate strongman, the one who is completely dedicated to serving the divine, clearing the path, and building the bridge for what's to come.
But the main character of this manifesto, the specific, detailed case study that the source obsesses over, is the figure it identifies as Laxman or Ballroom.
The Sheshnag.
The Sheshnag, what is that?
The Sheshnag is the king of all serpents in Hindu mythology, the primordial, eternal serpent on whose coils the god Vishnu rests between universes. He represents protection, eternity, renewal, and the very foundation of cosmic order.
And this source claims that this archetype has been born on Earth as a man named Balen Shah.
That is the claim.
So let's deep dive into Balen Shah, because if you were writing a cyberpunk novel, you could not invent a better or more unlikely protagonist.
You really couldn't. Balen Shah. Born April 27th, 1990. He is a millennial, squarely in that generation.
Born in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal.
Born in a neighborhood called Naradevi, in the heart of old Kathmandu. But his story, crucially, starts with migration. His family is Mathili. They are from the Mohatari district, way down in the south of Nepal, in the hot, flat plains region known as the Madhesh. His father was an Ayurvedic practitioner.
So right away, you have this inherent tension in his identity. He is born in the capital, the seat of power, the city of the ruling elite. But his ethnic and cultural roots are in the south, in a region that has historically been marginalized and looked down upon by the Kathmandu establishment.
He is the classic insider-outsider. He speaks the language of the city, he understands its rhythms, but he carries the heritage of the plains in his blood. He bridges that cultural and geographical divide just by existing.
And he's a structural engineer. This isn't just a side note. The source emphasizes this again and again.
This is absolutely crucial to understanding him. He didn't just study political science or law like most politicians. He went to V.S. Nikitan School, then Himalayan White House International College. He got his master's in technology from a prestigious university in India, Visvesvaraya Technological University. And right now, as of January 2026, he is pursuing a PhD in civil engineering at Kathmandu University.
And what's the focus of his PhD?
This is the poetic part. His research focus is on the conservation of traditional Nuwa heritage sites.
So he's an engineer, a man of concrete and steel, but he's dedicating his most advanced studies to preserving the ancient soul of the city he governs.
It's a perfect metaphor for his political style. The source makes this point. Most politicians show up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Balen understands the load-bearing columns. He sees the city not as a collection of voters, but as a complex physical system with stress points and structural weaknesses. He sees where the system is failing at a foundational level.
But here's the wild twist in the story. He isn't just a nerd with a calculator and blueprints. He is, or at least he was, a rapper.
And a very famous and influential one in the Nepali hip-hop scene. He entered the game around 2012 under the stage name Balen.
The source calls it the microphone as weapon.
That's a good way to put it. His breakout track was a song called Sadak Balak, which translates to street child. And it was raw. It was about the dirt, the grime, the poverty, the struggle of the urban poor. It wasn't glamorous.
And he made his bones, his reputation, in a place called Raw Bars.
That's the premier battle rap league in Nepal. It was a YouTube series that became a phenomenon.
And for anyone who doesn't know, what is battle rap?
It is verbal combat. It is pure, unadulterated lyrical warfare. You have to dismantle your opponent line by line in front of a live, screaming crowd. It requires incredible speed of thought, wit, confidence, and aggression. It teaches you to be utterly fearless on a microphone.
And the source makes a very interesting point about where this music lived. It talks about Kathmandu's rooftops. What does that mean?
Yes. To understand Balen's rise, you have to understand the unique urban geography of Kathmandu. The city sits in a valley, a bowl. It captures smog and dust. On the ground level, the streets are narrow, gridlocked, noisy, chaotic. It can be a very claustrophobic sensory overload.
So where do you go to escape?
You go up, you go to the couch, the rooftop. Almost every building has a flat, accessible roof. That is the city's communal backyard. It's where the laundry dries. It's where you fly kites during festivals. And critically, it's where the youth hang out. It's where teenagers go to smoke and listen to music and complain about their parents and the government. It is a city above the city.
And that is where Balen's music, his nefop, resonated.
He wasn't getting played on the government-controlled radio stations. His music was blasting out of Bluetooth speakers on the rooftops. He was literally and metaphorically broadcasting his message from above the political establishment directly to the youth. His key tracks, like Baladan, were brutal indictments of the country's corruption.
So you have this incredible fusion, the engineer and the rapper, the structuralist and the poet, the guy who understands load-bearing columns and the guy who understands rhyming couplets. And in 2022, he decides to run for mayor of Kathmandu.
And he runs as an independent. He runs without the backing of any major political party.
Which, in a place like Nepal, with its entrenched party system, is usually political suicide.
It's seen as a fool's errand. The major parties, the Nepali Congress, the UML, they are machines. They have the money, the organizational cadres in every neighborhood, the history. They are the Newtonian gravity of Nepali politics. They just win. It's what they do.
But Balen had the rooftops.
He had the rooftops. He had the youth. He had the widespread frustration with the old guard. And he had a brilliant symbol, the cane, the laurel. It represented an old man's walking stick, a symbol of support for the people, and also a tool to punish the corrupt.
And he won.
It was a political earthquake. It was a shockwave that nobody saw coming. He got 38.6% of the vote in a multi-candidate race. He defeated Surjana Shrestha from the Congress Party and Keshav Stapit from the UML, the giants of the old guard. He didn't just win. He humiliated the entire party system. Kathmandu voted for a man with no party whip, no one to answer to but the people who elected him.
So fast forward to our present, January 2026. Balen has been mayor for a few years. How does a battle rapper govern a chaotic city of millions? This brings us to Section 6, governing like an engineer.
He governs by looking at the blueprints. He doesn't govern by consensus building or making friends. His style is described in the source as corrective surgery.
That sounds painful.
Surgery usually is. But if it's done right, it saves the patient. Balen's approach wasn't to try and make everyone happy. It was to try and make the system work according to its own rules.
Give me some concrete examples of these surgeries.
Okay, first, waste management. The city was literally drowning in trash because of a cartel of corrupt private contractors who weren't doing their jobs. Balen came in, cut through the political knot, and started enforcing the regulations, fining companies, and cleaning up the streets. Then, urban decongestion. He took a bulldozer to the problem.
This was the really controversial stuff, wasn't it?
Hugely controversial. He started demolishing illegal structures built on public land. If a building was encroaching on the sidewalk, or built too close to the river, he knocked it down. It didn't matter if it belonged to a millionaire businessman or a politically connected crony. The engineer looked at the municipal map, saw the violation, and removed it. Pure and simple.
But the ultimate example, the one that feels like it's straight out of a movie scene, is the story of the Takucha River.
The Takucha. This is the story that perfectly encapsulates his entire approach. So, there is a river, a stream, in Kathmandu called the Takucha. But if you walked around the city 5 years ago, you wouldn't see it in certain areas.
Why not?
Because it was gone. It had been literally buried alive. Over decades, powerful developers had built concrete tunnels over the river, essentially turning it into an underground sewer. And then they built massive commercial buildings on top of it. Banks, malls, office buildings, parking lots. The river was erased from the map, buried under millions of dollars of prime real estate.
And Balen decided to find it.
We decided to daylight it, to resurrect it. Can you imagine the scene? He brings in these huge excavators and sends them into the most expensive commercial district in the city. You have powerful business owners screaming, "You can't do this. I have a deed to this land." You have lawyers waving court injunctions.
And what does Balen do?
He just digs. He ignores them. The engineer in him knows the river is there. He knows the original city map is right and the buildings are wrong. And his crew starts smashing through these thick layers of concrete. And suddenly, there it is. The black, sludge-filled water of the Takucha, seeing the sun for the first time in 40 years.
That is such a powerful metaphor for his entire political project.
It is the Sheshnag archetype in action. The serpent. Rivers are often seen as serpents in mythology. He uncoiled the serpent that the corrupt city had tried to bury and kill. He is exposing the natural flow of things that corruption tried to hide under a layer of concrete and greed.
But you can't go around bulldozing the city, even with good intentions, without making a lot of enemies.
Oh, he made enemies everywhere. Human Rights Watch criticized him very heavily for his treatment of street vendors. They argued that by aggressively clearing the sidewalks, he was taking away the livelihood of the city's poorest and most vulnerable people.
The corrective surgery didn't use any anesthesia.
Not at all. It was brutal efficiency. And he clashed constantly with the federal government. At one point, in a major power move, he just stopped picking up the trash from Singha Durbar.
Wait, Singha Durbar is the equivalent of the White House and Capitol Hill combined in Nepal. It's the seat of the entire national government.
Yes, the administrative heart of the nation. Balen basically said, if the federal government won't cooperate with the city on key development projects, then the city won't pick up your trash. It was an incredible standoff.
He let the garbage pile up at the prime minister's front gate.
He did. It was a massive flex.
Yeah.
It was a demonstration that the mayor controls the ground reality, the physical functioning of the capital, even if the prime minister controls the army and the treasury.
The source also mentions some nationalist controversies. He banned Indian films.
He did. He banned a film called Adi Purush over a single line of dialogue related to a dispute about the birthplace of the goddess Sita. He's a fierce Nepali nationalist. He famously put a map of Greater Nepal in his office, a map that includes territories that Nepal lost to the British in a war in 1816.
So he is volatile, he is ruthlessly efficient, he is an engineer, and he is a rock star with a massive youth following. Where does this trajectory go? Section 7, the future of Nepal in the world.
Well, looking at the timeline provided by the source, which is set in our present, January 2026, Balen has just made his next big move. In December of 2025, he officially joined the Rastriya Swatantra Party, or RSP.
The National Independent Party. That's the new anti-establishment party, right?
Exactly. And following the recent resignation of the old guard Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, Balen Shah is emerging as the leading contender to become the next Prime Minister of Nepal.
So the rapper mayor from the rooftops might actually run the entire country.
He is riding a massive wave of Gen Z anger and energy. Specifically, the source mentions that the federal government, in a panic over the Flux, tried to ban 26 social media platforms. The youth revolted, and Balen stood with them against the censorship.
And this is where the whole thing comes full circle. The source claims Nepal is the designated pilot program for Kalkiism.
This is the endgame presented in the manifesto. The source proposes that with Balen at the helm, Nepal can target an annual growth rate of 20%.
20% is. That's not just impossible, that's science fiction.
Yeah.
Roof blown off numbers. But the idea is that a small, agile, and relatively poor nation like Nepal can pivot to the new operating system much faster than a giant entrenched behemoth like the US or China. They can implement the cashless system, the time-based valuation, the universal guarantees, all on a national scale.
It becomes the laboratory for the age of abundance.
Exactly. The source envisions it as the proof of concept. If it works in Nepal, if they can actually achieve that kind of growth and prosperity, the model can be scaled to the rest of the world.
Wow, okay. We have covered a staggering amount of ground here.
Yeah.
From the intellectual confusion of Paul Krugman in New York to the physical excavation of lost rivers in Kathmandu.
It is a cohesive and surprisingly logical narrative if you look at it from a high enough altitude. The old world is breaking down, which is the flux. The experts who built that world are blind to why, which is the crisis. A new framework is emerging to explain it, which is Kalkiism. And new avatars, new kinds of leaders are rising to implement it, which is Balen Shah. And I want to end on that final line from the source that you quoted earlier. The earth endures. It's this era of limitation that perishes.
It's a hopeful thought, in a strange way. The chaos isn't the end of the world. It's just the birth pangs of the next one.
I want to leave our listener with a final provocation, a thought experiment, something the source alluded to, but I want to make it personal for everyone listening right now.
It is the ultimate question of the age of abundance, isn't it?
It is. I want you to genuinely imagine that the transition happens. The source is right. The robots take most of the jobs, the fusion reactors turn on and energy becomes nearly free, the cost of living drops to almost zero. You have a house, you have food, you have healthcare, all your basic needs are met, and your bank account is gone because money is gone.
And the only currency left is time. Your time. You wake up tomorrow morning, it's a Tuesday. You don't have to go to work to survive. You don't need to earn a living. Your hour of contribution is worth exactly the same as everyone else's hour, no matter what you choose to do.
What do you do with your day? Do you go back to sleep? Do you finally write that novel you've been thinking about? Do you volunteer at the local animal shelter? Do you learn to play the guitar? Do you spend the day helping your neighbor build a garden?
When the struggle for survival finally ends, the struggle for meaning begins.
If your value is no longer tied to your paycheck, who are you? What are you worth?
That is the question we might all have to answer, and sooner than we think.
This has been The Deep Dive. Navigating the flux, watching the end times, and keeping an eye on the rooftops of the world. Stay curious.
Goodbye.